Okay, we're live, guys. Thank you very much for joining me for this episode, for this podcast. This is a podcast that I've been meaning to do for a while, and I'm happy that I've had the opportunity to do it now. I've been meaning to have her on the show for a while to talk about the whole Kashmir issue, to talk about the whole issue of sort of Islamist organizations in the West increasingly focusing their attention on places like Kashmir to sort of rile up their base. But before I get into it, before we really, dive deep into this whole issue, help me welcome to the show, Aarti Tikoo. Aarti, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Shambho. It's an honor to be on your show. You've been doing a great job, honestly. And I like the fact that at least, some Indians are taking to this medium, which is still, I would say, rudimentary at certain level in India.
Right.
But Indians abroad are doing it. It's a great honor here.
Thank you. I appreciate you, coming on as well. So before we get started, Aarti, would you mind just giving us a little bit of background about you and what you've been doing professionally?
Well, I started as a journalist in Jammu and Kashmir, and this was a time when militancy was still, substantial in Kashmir and other parts of the state as well. And I started with a local newspaper, and then I moved on to national newspaper, first with Hindustan Times, then with Times of India.
Right.
I was the regional correspondent for Times of India, and I traveled the length and breadth of Jammu and Kashmir state, which included Ladakh at that point of time. After that, I went to the US. I went to Columbia University, and I did a master's in international affairs. I also had the good fortune to intern with the United Nations, with BBC in New York. And I also worked at Columbia University as a researcher. And I came back 9-10 years ago to Delhi because there were several considerations. One of the consideration at that time was that India is a different place. India has opportunity. While as in the US, due to subprime crisis, we had a major, slide in economy. The media industry took a big hit in the US at that point of time.
Right.
So I returned as an editor to the Times of India. It's like my, second home.
Right.
Yeah. And I was an editor with the Times of India till last year. And I, of course, went back to my first love, which was reporting on the ground in Kashmir. And every time there was a crisis in Kashmir, I did go to cover it for the Times of India. In 2019, I think I was one of the few journalists who was on the ground when the government of India decided to nullify Article 370, which guaranteed special status to Jammu and Kashmir within the Union of India.
Right.
So when it was imposed, I was there in Kashmir, and I covered the situation that followed. So that's the brief history of my professional career. But after that, I actually made a move. I switched from Times of India to Indo-Asian News Service. I'm Foreign and Strategic Affairs Editor with IANS Today in New Delhi. And I look at, of course, from Kashmir to China to Ladakh to all our both internal and external security and foreign affairs of India.
Yeah, so the reason I wanted to ask you about your background as well, and it's going to come up in our discussion in a little bit, but what I want to do today on our podcast together is I want to, like I said, talk a little bit about how the sort of Islamist organizations' gaze has not necessarily shifted away, but also kind of refocused their attention on Kashmir ever since the abrogation of Article 370. And one of the when it happened, there was obviously a lot of noise in the West, in the United States, and one of the things that happened around when that noise was at its probably the highest was those two congressional hearings on Kashmir in the United States, one of which was attended by you. And that was kind of, for me at least, when I was following that news back in, I believe it was October when I was following it, it kind of really struck me as in, wow, this is something that, people in the United States and politicians in the United States are taking very seriously. And the organizations that sort of pushed for this hearing to happen and the politicians that participated in this hearing really starts to give us a good idea of what is going on with these organizations with relation to Kashmir in the West right now. But first of all, if you could just give us an idea about how that hearing really came to pass.
As I told you that I was one of the few journalists who was on the ground on August 5th, 2019, when the government of India decided to bifurcate the state of Jammu and Kashmir into two union territories,
Right.
and thus nullifying Article 370, which had guaranteed special status to the state under the Constitution of India. Now, that was not one of the biggest, but I think the biggest political event in the history of Jammu and Kashmir since independence.
Right.
So I was there, and since I've been an old hand on Kashmir, I have worked there for a long time. I went back to cover it.
Right.
And I, of course, was an eyewitness to whatever happened, how the situation unfolded, how the government also imposed a communication blockade.
Right.
In the sense that internet was shut down, phones were shut down. Because they had prior information and there were intelligence inputs of violence in Kashmir. Because if you remember, in Feb 2019, there was a massive suicide bombing perpetrated by Jaish-e-Mohammed, a Pakistan-based terror group, on the CRPF paramilitary of India. And 40 CRPF soldiers were killed in that suicide bombing. So terror and violent attacks and suicide bombings, these have been a norm in Kashmir for the last 30 years.
Right.
So in that sense, Kashmir has never been normal in the last 30 years. And whatever measures the government takes even now or took in 2019, they were in sync with the fact that Kashmir is a conflict zone. Kashmir has been a war zone, a limited war zone. Pakistan's proxy war, which is essentially terrorism, Islamist terrorism in Kashmir, that has been going on. And therefore, there was a certain situation in 2019 of August. In I think around September, I got a call from my friends in Hindu American Foundation that there was a possibility of a hearing, a US congressional hearing, where they are inviting witnesses to basically do fact-finding on human rights in Kashmir. And they asked me if I would be interested, and I said that I have no issues. I've been on the ground and I can speak what I saw as a witness. So they nominated me for this panel as a witness.
Right.
The Congressional Subcommittee on Foreign Affairs, headed by Brett Sherman, they called me. Brett Sherman's office called me, and they did a phone interview for an hour, asking me about what I had seen, what my opinions are. And after that phone conversation, that phone interview, they sent me an invite for being a witness to the US congressional hearing. And I was all right with it because as a journalist, as an eyewitness, I think it is your moral obligation to tell the world what you saw.
Right.
So I went to that US congressional hearing thinking that it's a very straightforward hearing where they will establish what facts are and who has done what this communication blockade means, uh, who is committing violence and who is actually imposing the real lockdown in Kashmir.
Right.
But I was clearly naive and I was very idealistic. I didn't realize that it was a setup. It
Right.
was something that, it was a trap that I was walking straight into because, I actually felt like if you've seen that movie, it's a classic, James Stewart's movie,
Oh,
Mr.
Mr. Smith Goes to
Smith,
Washington.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I felt like that country bumpkin.
Right.
I have had no idea about how these congressional hearings are held, what the motive is,
Yeah.
what the politics is, what the optics of those congressional hearing is. So I went as a very idealistic journalist, and I came out as a very cynical,
Right.
very cynical person because I realized that politics and optics of it is very different from how we journalists think and how we are trained to think about situations and events which we are supposed to cover.
Yeah, it was very interesting. What I found particularly baffling about that hearing is because, again, when you tell us about your background, it makes sense. All right, this is a person that has been reporting from the ground, that was on the ground when, after this whole abrogation thing had happened as well. She's probably the only person on the panel that was actually on the ground and has seen what is going on in Kashmir. So this is a person that you ask your questions from. But what I saw is, yes, you gave this opening statement, and then Ilhan Omar proceeds to like tell you that you shouldn't be a mouthpiece of the government, and then doesn't even let you clarify. That's the point that pissed me off a little bit, because I was like, all right, you make an accusation and you ask a question, but then let the person clarify. Let her make her position clear, which is not what happened. Then she goes to like Natasha Kaul, then she goes to Angana Chatterjee, and they go on about whatever the hell they go on about. But that's the part that I was just like, well, if you invite a journalist that has been on the ground and that has witnessed these events on the ground, let her make her position clear. You know what I mean?
Well, you see, that was not the idea. The whole
Yeah.
idea was to corner me because
Yeah.
they know where I come from. They know what I've been through. They know that I'm probably one of the few persons who has seen Kashmir inside out, both as a Kashmiri, since I was born and brought up in Kashmir, and I went back as a journalist. I was the only and the first and the youngest displaced Kashmiri Pandit woman journalist in Kashmir when I went back.
Right.
Yeah. So they know that that I have a certain background. They know that I have a certain education. They know I have a certain expertise, and I can bust their myths and their propaganda in a jiffy.
Right.
So this was a setup because not just Ilhan Omar, she of course shut me up, and she came with a script.
Right.
She read out that script. That script came from CARE. We will talk about
Which
these
is so crazy, right? Like, you come to this hearing with a pre-planned script and you
yeah.
read that script out, no matter
Exactly.
what the consequences.
So, which means that you're not interested in fact finding. You're
Exactly.
not
Yeah.
interested in knowing, what I saw on the ground. You're not interested in knowing anything. You already made up your mind. So
Right.
the hearing, of course, was a sham. It was a
Yep.
farce.
Yep.
Because the whole agenda of hearing is essentially in the US. We don't have such hearings in India.
Right.
But in the US, as far as we have read and as far as we know, that hearings are held to establish truth, to
Right.
establish facts. But in this hearing, this was the probably one of the few, or maybe the only, I don't know, uh, where every person in that congressional hearing, I don't think there was any Republican except for the co-chair who
Right.
left out. speaking for a minute or two. Every single person who had preconceived notions, had preconceived information, and they had made up their mind about what the facts are.
Yep.
So not only Ilhan, but every other person also denied me the chance to speak, to
Yes.
establish facts, to tell them, to give my testimony in a way.
Right. And it's hilarious to me. The funniest part for me, at least, was Ilhan Omar reading from that script and basically just saying that you're a mouthpiece of the government, which is again funny to me because I've noticed this in the last few months or so, since more and more people have come to know about you and your work and in Kashmir. There's been this charge leveled against you that you're this right-wing nut, which is hilarious to me because I've been following your work a little bit before that time. And anybody who's followed your work for at least the last 2 or 3 years will know that you're not, you've been equally critical of the Modi government and the BJP as well. And so for Ilhan Omar to come out and say, oh, this is just a mouthpiece of the BJP government, it kind of really highlights how insincere this hearing was.
Well, it's hilarious because the night before the hearing, Stand With Kashmir, which is a Pakistan-backed propaganda campaign on Twitter and on Facebook and on social media, actually, a red dot campaign, which is opposed to the government of India's decision about nullification of 370, and which's been basically seeking independence for Kashmir.
Right.
They ran a campaign against me, maligning me and vilifying me, saying that that I'm a mouthpiece of government. And what they do is they pull out all my tweets, all my posts wherein I had criticized Prime Minister Narendra Modi, wherein I had criticized the BJP government, wherein I had been, I would say, very offensive to the Hindutva forces.
Right.
So it was hilarious because if you want to malign somebody, if you want to vilify somebody, and you at the same time saying that you are a mouthpiece of government, and your evidence is that I have been critical of the government. Right. Your evidence is, what on earth are you thinking? It actually established that I am a credible journalist. I have been critical of both the Congress government and the BJP government, and I still am, on many issues. I think the problem lies in one issue. On Kashmir and on many other issues, I have been consistent. Yep. I have been consistently saying that in Kashmir, the biggest oppressor is the Pakistani invisible state.
Right.
It is not visible to you, but it prevails there because Pakistan's ISI has invested so much into Kashmir through terror groups, through militant groups, through coercive groups who blackmail people, who intimidate people, who threaten people.
Right.
And they have entered the entire system. It's not visible, but it's there.
Yeah.
They've been, in the last 30 years, and this is what I said in the congressional hearing too, that of course Pakistani terror groups did kill Kashmiri Pandits, they targeted Kashmiri Pandits, they drove out the entire ethnic minority of Kashmir from Kashmir. But the biggest victim of Pakistan-backed terrorism and Islamist terrorism is Kashmiri Muslim itself, because if you look at the numbers, the number of Kashmiri Muslims who disagreed with the idea of independence, who disagreed with Nizam-e-Mustafa, who disagreed with Jamaat-e-Islami, who disagreed with Lashkar-e-Taiba, Hizbul Mujahideen, Jaish-e-Mohammed, who disagreed with everything that has a connection with Pakistan or with independence.
Right.
They've been killed.
Yep.
They were killed. And that is the biggest number of casualties in Kashmir. After, terrorists, it's the Kashmiri Muslim civilians who've been killed the most. So when I say this, I'm one talking on behalf of those Kashmiri Muslims who do not have a voice,
Right.
who have been denied that voice not just by Pakistan or Pakistani terror groups, but denied by mainstream Indian media as well.
Right.
And this doesn't limit there. It's also been denied by the international press because they've been following the same. And now when I say this, that Pakistan is the biggest oppressor, and if any political party in India uh, agrees with me, that doesn't make me left wing or right wing.
Right.
That simply shows that somebody has understood what I and many other people have been saying over the years.
Yep.
If I say that India has to be a secular state, India is fundamentally a secular state, that doesn't make me left wing or right wing. That simply means that somebody, if Congress agrees with it, fine, okay, you can call me a Congress stooge. But that is my view. That is how I think. That is what I've understood from the ground, from my experience, from my education, and from my background.
Yeah, that was something that. Oh, sorry, I think my voice might be echoing where you are. So if you don't mind, oh, it's gone now. Well, that problem must have sorted itself out. So what I was going to say was, what was interesting to me during that hearing is that I think everybody has a written statement that they provide after the hearing as well. And I was reading yours, and I'd recommend that everybody read Aarti's written statement that she provided during the hearing as well. Because those are the points that kind of got lost in the whole Ilhan Omar coming up, and talking about how, you're a mouthpiece of the government. Because there were some important points in that written statement that really got lost. One of them was that you just said, talking about how one of the biggest casualties in the Kashmir problem has been Kashmiri Muslims that do not fall hook, line, and sinker for the Pakistani propaganda as well. The second important point I think that you made as well is that, look, a lot of these protesters, a majority of these protesters that are talking about, Azadi and all of that stuff, they're talking about Azadi. None of these people are walking with the Kashmiri flag. None of these people are talking about the constitution, the Kashmiri constitution. They're carrying Pakistani flags. They're chanting Nizam-e-Mustafa. They're talking Azadi. So where is this, you're talking about this democratic struggle in Kashmir. Where is this democratic struggle? And I think that was a very good point, but it got lost because, I don't think people were interested in the truth.
That is a critical point. Whether it's the mainstream media, the left-leaning media in India, left-leaning media in the US, and the rest of the world, they forget what has happened in Kashmir in the last 30 years.
Right.
In 1990, I was a kid, but I remember what happened. It wasn't a fight for Azadi, it wasn't a militancy, what we call militancy,
Right.
Terrorism. It didn't start because Kashmir wanted to be independent.
Right.
Started because the question of self-determination, the question of plebiscite, was at the base of that entire movement. And what is the right to self-determination? The right to self-determination comes from the fact that there was a UN resolution which said that Jammu and Kashmir people will get the right to self-determination to choose whether they wanted to be with either India or Pakistan.
Right.
So there were only two choices. All my, through all my childhood, I used to hear these, noises. I didn't understand what it meant at that point.
Right.
But the conversations in our drawing rooms, the conversations among our friends, Muslim neighbors, I grew up in that culture, was that, Kashmir was supposed to be with Pakistan because Kashmir has a Muslim majority.
Right.
So the fundamental question is that what has happened in the last 30 years? From JKLF to Hizbul Mujahideen to Lashkar-e-Taiba to Jaish-e-Mohammed, they have targeted not only Hindu minorities, They've also targeted Sikhs in Chhattisgarh, Singh,
Yes.
for example. They've targeted every pro-Indian Muslim voice in Kashmir. They've targeted the Indian state, and they've been raising the flag of Islam. Now, flag of Islam is different from flag of Jammu and Kashmir.
Yes.
Jammu and Kashmir had a very I'll not get into how the real politics of Jammu and Kashmir, but symbolically the flag and the constitution and everything else which was autonomous in Jammu and Kashmir was symbolically secular.
Yes.
Okay, but none of these terror groups and none of these protesters, so-called protesters, they're actually rioters. They're mobs which turn violent, which can turn violent at any point of time.
Right.
So they've been carrying the flags of Islam, they've been carrying the flags of Pakistan, and they've been carrying the flags of ISIS.
Right.
So you cannot say that these protesters are the voice, the ultimate representative of Kashmir. You cannot say that they are the secular voice of Kashmir. You cannot say that they are seeking something secular, which is independence from both Pakistan and India, and even from now China. So none of it has been a secular idea or a secular movement.
Yeah.
So far.
I thought that was a very salient point that was not able to be raised properly during the hearing. But it also kind of brings me to now some of the organizations that were behind getting this hearing organized, and some of the organizations that are based in the West, that are based in the United States, that have now really strongly turned their attention towards Kashmir, because they feel like it's a great opportunity for them to rile up their base, whatever that base might be. And I remember you writing about two of these organizations like ICNA and HHRD, and you were also talking about how many of these organizations, including CARE, are now working together under a common umbrella for the causes of, earlier they used to fight for the causes of Palestine, but now they seem to be talking about Kashmir a lot as well, courtesy of Ilhan, Omar, and all those people too. So talk to us a little bit about some of these organizations which you think are significant in this situation.
Okay, so after the congressional hearing, when I returned to India, and I reviewed everything that had happened in the US, I reviewed my own performance, I reviewed what had happened in that house. I understood that, this was all organized, this was very structured, and I needed to understand, how did Ilhan Omar, of all the places, all the issues, how did she get involved in Kashmir? What is her connection to Kashmir? She is remotely, there is no connection whatsoever to Kashmir. And I wanted to understand, how did she arrive with the script?
Right.
How did she manage to browbeat me? How did she manage to silence me in that house while everybody got a chance to speak? So I started investigating, and to my astonishment, there was a lot of material online available freely, which actually unveiled the entire nexus between this left lobby and the Islamist lobby, not just in the US, but also in Pakistan.
Right.
So, can you give me a second? I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, get that. Guys, if you have any questions for me in the meantime, fire away. There's only so much you can do when the bell rings. Yeah, so I think what we're gonna, here we go, we're back.
Yeah, so I realized that there was information, and I just needed to dig in more, which I did. And I found that the biggest organization or a consortium of NGOs in the US is called Interaction.
Yeah.
Interaction is a huge platform, an umbrella of 180 non-profit organizations in the US.
Wow.
And of course, in this platform, Interaction is funded by the US State Department. It is funded by US AID. So I started, learning about Interaction, and I noticed that Interaction in 2017, they came up with an idea that they need to. Salia, can you please get the door? So they needed to. So what in 2017 they came up with an idea that they should set up a platform to fight religious discrimination against Muslims
Right.
in the US. So they created a platform called Together Project. Now, Together Project, which was supposed to fight discrimination against Muslims in the US, they brought 5 most controversial non-profit organizations on board.
Right.
Now, who were these? Who were these organizations? One was HHRD. So HHRD is Helping Hands for Relief and Development.
Okay.
They brought Zakat Foundation. They brought Islamic Relief, and they brought an organization called American Relief Agency for the Horn of Africa.
Okay.
And one more organization called United Muslim Relief. So 5 organizations. So I'm just trying to create a map for our audience. There is Interaction, 180 organizations in the US. In 2017, they create another platform called Together Project to fight discrimination against Muslims. And who are these organizations? 5 most controversial organizations. I will tell you, I'll explain why they are controversial.
Sure.
Let me rename them again. One is HHRD, Helping Hands for Relief and Development. The second is Islamic Relief. And the third is Zakat Foundation. Fourth is American Relief Agency for the Horn of Africa.
Okay.
And fifth is United Muslim Relief. Now, they are supposed to fight religious discrimination. But look at HHRD, for example. HHRD is working closely with ICNA, which is Islamic Council of North America.
Right.
Islamic, Circle of North America.
Islamic Circle, that's right.
Islamic Circle, yeah. So then, who are these connected with? Both HHRD and ICNA are connected to Jamaat-e-Islami in Pakistan.
Right.
So they conduct seminars and conferences with the most
And openly too. They're not trying to hide this connection either.
No. They don't. They
Yeah.
don't. It's all open. Everything is available open.
Right.
In public domain. So Jamaat-e-Islam, let me tell you something about Jamaat-e-Islami Pakistan.
Right.
Jamaat-e-Islami Pakistan is the same as Jamaat-e-Islami Kashmir. Now, Jamaat-e-Islami Kashmir is very different from Jamaat-e-Islami Hind, which is, which calls itself Indian. Jamaat-e-Islami India. Hind is Indian. Jamaat-e-Islami Kashmir affiliates itself with the Jamaat-e-Islami Pakistan. Jamaat-e-Islami's militant wing, the armed wing, is Hizbul Mujahideen.
Right.
Now, Hizbul Mujahideen has perpetrated several terror attacks. They were at the forefront of driving Kashmiri Pandits out of the valley. Hizbul Mujahideen has killed dozens and dozens of not just Kashmiri Pandits, but Muslims as well.
Right.
Then, Hizbul Mujahideen is headed by Sayyid Salahuddin, who is based in Pakistan. Okay, and this Jamaat-e-Islami Pakistan has been supporting Jamaat-e-Islami Kashmir and Hizbul Mujahideen,
Right.
and they are working closely with ICNA and HHRD in the US.
Wow.
Now, why I'm talking about HHRD, ICNA, and Jamaat is because HHRD was running a campaign, was backing this campaign, Stand With Kashmir, against India and against me,
Right.
way before the congressional hearing.
Right.
Stand With Kashmir, after August 5th, 2019, ran a campaign backed by ICNA and HHRD. They held several demonstrations in the US in several cities.
It kind of came out of nowhere, didn't it? It just kind of appeared overnight.
Yeah, so I'll get
Yeah.
to that.
Okay.
So they held several demonstrations in the US against India, calling India fascist, calling India Hindutva fascist, the same rhetoric as Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan has been,
Right.
writing several columns in the US newspapers. So it's the same gang, it's the same circle.
Right.
Now, Stand With Kashmir, I'm glad Middle East Forum did an expose on Stand With Kashmir. They were able to track the people behind Stand With Kashmir. Who are these people? They are academics, they are journalists, they are artists, and they are essentially propagandists for Pakistan, um, based in Pakistan, based in Europe, based in other countries. And one of them, of course, no, two of them are, of course, Natasha Kaul and Angana Chatterjee.
Right.
So, Stand With Kashmir was running the campaign backed by HHRD, ICNA, backed by Hizbul Mujahideen, backed by Jamaat-e-Islami.
Right.
And they were running this campaign not only against India after August 5, 2019, but before the congressional hearing. This
Right.
entire gang, anonymously, Stand With Kashmir, an anonymous group, was running this campaign against Aarti Tikoo and maligning her as a mouthpiece of the government. And for evidence, they were showing that I'm critical of the government.
Right. That's right.
So that is the level of their intelligence and their IQ.
Yeah.
So now, then the other organizations under this Together project, Islamic Relief,
Right.
they work with Hamas, okay, and Muslim Brotherhood.
Right.
Zakat Foundation has had ties with Al Qaeda.
Right. And
Then
supported by Turkey to a large extent too. Yeah.
ARAHA, American Relief Agency for the Horn of Africa, they have been declared by several countries that they are working close with terror groups and with Iraqi intelligence service.
Wow.
Yeah. And then United Muslim Relief has again been working with Hamas.
Right.
So these are the groups which are working under Together Project. And Together Project works under Interaction.
Right.
And Interaction is funded by the US government.
Right.
Right. So all of this goes to show the nexus between the Islamists, the hardcore Islamist groups, with the system within the US, and of course in Pakistan and other places in
Right.
Middle East, in Palestine. So
Yeah. Sorry. Go on.
so nothing is innocent, and nothing is spontaneous. None of these organizations are there for the rights of Kashmiri Muslims, really, because
Yeah.
if they were talking about the rights of Kashmiri Muslims, they would have been talking about the Kashmiri Muslim shopkeeper who was killed for defying the militant diktats in Kashmir after August 5th, 2019. who was, because the lockdown was imposed by terror groups and not the government, because after a couple of months, the government eased all the restrictions. The government to begin with had not asked people not to, do their business or not to work. The main lockdown was essentially lockdown against public gatherings, and it was for the communication blockade. So these people are not, these organizations are in a way directly, indirectly funded by the ISI, I would say, at one level, because Jamaat, Hizbul Mujahideen, all the terror groups are funded by Pakistan's inter-services intelligence agency. And in the US, they are funded, their charities are funded by the US government. In other words, the US taxpayers are paying for these organizations.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy that Trump comes in and he's all bombastic about rooting out Islamic terrorism and all of that stuff, but his government is still paying for a lot of these quote-unquote charities?
Yes, so you have to understand that, the geopolitics of South Asia is not just Pakistan and India, it is also Afghanistan. And US engagement in Afghanistan, it's been a long war, 18 years of war. US has spent trillions of dollars on Afghanistan, first on, bombing the country, and then, of course, rebuilding the country. And in Afghanistan, the biggest problem is Pakistan. The biggest, threat is Pakistan, because Afghan Taliban was and continues to be backed by Pakistan. In its latest report, the U.S. State Department report just yesterday said that Pakistan remained a safe haven for terror groups in India and Afghanistan, targeting both these countries. And they named Afghan Taliban, they named Haqqani Network in Afghanistan, and they named Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed in Pakistan, targeting India. So what are we saying? We are saying that America has had a compulsion to be in Afghanistan because of these terror groups which are backed by Afghanistan. Which are backed by Pakistan, sorry. So Pakistan is the problem, and America understands that Pakistan is the problem. That is why it is, on one hand getting blackmailed by its charities in the US, on the other hand getting blacked by terror groups and Pakistan's ISI in Afghanistan and India. So the US, of course, understands this, and they, I think, are trying different strategies, different tactics to bring this monster under control, but it's not been easy. It's been a tough battle for the US because in the last 18 years, they haven't been able to figure out how to control Pakistan, which is a nuclear state, and which keeps threatening that they can go nuclear. If you remember, after August 5th, 2019, Pakistan even threatened nuclear war.
Well, Imran Khan went to the New York Times and threatened nuclear war with bloody India.
Exactly. So anyone, whether it's India or the US, they know what. I mean, essentially, Pakistan is a rogue state, and a rogue state is blackmailing the biggest superpower of the world because it has got nukes and it has got all these terror groups which are let loose by the Pakistani state, which is essentially Pakistani army.
What I also find very interesting is, and we spoke about it briefly offline as well, with with all these sort of groups whose main focus, that are associated with ICNA, that are associated with CARE, and whose main focus for the longest time, at least in the United States, has been with Israel and Palestine. And they've been mostly talking about Israel and Palestine. Same with Ilhan Omar. Like, when you were surprised, it was for good reason that she's talking about Kashmir suddenly, because her career has only been, mostly talking about the Israel and Palestine issues. And so it's very interesting to see them kind of shift their focus a little bit from the Israel and Palestine issue to now focus on Kashmir. And only a couple of days ago, I saw the BDS movement, the super anti-Israel movement, had Arundhati Roy on to talk about Kashmir, which I'm like, what does BDS have to do with Kashmir? Like, why are they talking about Kashmir? But it's very interesting, this weird little shift. I think that they've been struggling a little bit because the problem of anti-Semitism is slowly being sort of understood in the United States, and now blatant open anti-Semitism is not something that Americans will take lying down. So you can't use that old blatant anti-Semitism that you were able to use, that these groups were able to use before. So they're thinking to themselves, oh, what can we do to rally our base, to kind of rile up our base? Well, let's use Kashmir. Let's use Kashmir. Let's talk about the Ummah being in danger, and let's use Kashmir. That's what I think. Like, what do you think? Why do you feel like these groups have, focused their attention on Kashmir so much?
This is my analysis. I
Sure.
could be wrong, but this is how I look at this whole issue. Couple of things have happened ever since the election of President Donald Trump.
Right.
One that President Trump has, in a way, legitimized Israel's position on Palestine and basically in the Middle East. Trump went out of his way to ensure that Jerusalem becomes the capital of Israel. So in a way, he's finalized Israel's problem without saying that it's the solution.
Right.
But the rest of the world is not stupid to understand that. The Middle East understands that it is something that now cannot be reversed.
Sure.
The US government has said this. It's a done deal. The second thing that has happened is that Hamas overall has weakened over time. They have, of course, if you look at Palestinian economy, Palestine has been a complete wreckage. There is hardly any support coming for them within the big Middle East bloc.
Right.
Because Saudi Arabia itself has shifted under Mohammed bin Salman. It is definitely far more reformist than any of the predecessors of Mohammed bin Salman and other leaders within Saudi Arabia kingdom.
Right.
And we see that there is a shift. Saudi Arabia is moving towards the reform on several issues. The second thing is that Turkey has emerged as a competitor, as a rival to Saudi Arabia.
Right.
Turkey wants to claim, wants to be the new caliphate of the Muslim world.
Right.
Turkey under Erdogan wants to show that they are the leaders of Muslims across the world. So Turkey, Saudi Arabia are at loggerheads.
Yeah.
Pakistan is under massive debt. Pakistan's economy has been destroyed like anything.
Right.
They have they went borrowing from Saudi Arabia. They've been looking for funds from around the world. And Pakistan also realizes that Turkey is the emerging bloc in the Muslim world.
Yeah.
So Pakistan has allied with Turkey. Saudi Arabia has somewhat aligned with it was always aligned with US, but it's now being more open.
Right.
It's also an ally of Israel, right? So in a way, if you really look at Middle East, the Palestine issue, without we acknowledging and without we recognizing, is almost final. There is a certainty about Israel's position as of today. What is not clear today is, the rest of the other conflicts in the world, which includes, of
Right.
course, we have an issue in Syria, we have an issue in Iraq, we have so many other conflicts in Middle East, and then of course Kashmir is a very, very strategic location and a strategic area,
Right.
because after the election of President Trump, China has been at the receiving end of the US. And for China has invested hugely into the neighboring states which border India in South Asia to corner India. So China's alliance with Pakistan, India's alliance with the US, because as we know that under Prime Minister Modi, India and US have come far closer than ever before in our entire history of international relations with the US. So on one hand you have US and India, on the other hand you have China and Pakistan is connected with Turkey. So it's another alliance.
Right.
And China knows that the only way it can corner the US is by pressurizing its biggest ally in South Asia, in Asia actually, which is India.
Yep.
And how does China corner India? By needling it on its all border conflicts.
Right.
India has all the border states, not all the but Jammu and Kashmir, northeast states have border issues, border disputes with Pakistan and with China.
Yeah.
So China has ensured that India is needled on Kashmir, because that's what Pakistan also wants. Pakistan also sees an opportunity for itself in that. So their interests are in alignment as of today.
Right.
And American and Indian interests are getting aligned by the day.
Right.
Okay. So the focus has shifted from Palestine to Kashmir, because Turkey, which is trying to portray itself as the leader of Muslims in the world, is connected to Ilhan Omar. Ilhan Omar shares a very good relationship with President Erdogan in Turkey. Turkey has a relationship with Pakistan. Turkey, in fact, is backing Pakistan on Kashmir.
Yeah.
China is backing Pakistan on Kashmir. China is also backing itself on Kashmir.
Right.
So you have the Chinese Communist Party headed by Xi Jinping.
Yeah.
Plus Islamic Republic of Pakistan. Do you see the contradiction?
Yep.
Chinese Communist Party plus Islamic Republic of Pakistan and Turkey.
Yeah.
They are on the same axis.
Yeah.
And this axis, of course, thinks that, if you want to counter US as of today, you have to needle India, because India is turning out to be its biggest ally in Asia,
Right.
in South Asia. And therefore, so much focus on Kashmir. So Ilhan Omar and ICNA and HHRD and China and Turkey and Qatar, of course, also.
Right.
They're all on the same axis, because it suits them to needle India to fight against the US.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense, and it's what's a real shame, at least in my opinion, is the way certain people from the Indian diaspora that you would think would know more about the situation than the average lay American. These people are either actively or inadvertently have been very instrumental in sort of furthering this kind of Islamist propaganda, and especially organizations like Stand With Kashmir. You've probably heard of this organization, the whole Students Against Hindutva Ideology, who have been so openly talking in American universities about the Kashmir issue. And one of their most prominent partners is Stand With Kashmir. Similarly, you have people like Pramila Jayapal, who's a congresswoman, And the kind of lies that she's been speaking about Kashmir, the kind of lies that she's been speaking about the Citizenship Amendment Bill, and how vocal she has been in her support to organizations like these and people like Ilhan Omar, when she holds this hearing and then attacks a journalist, the only journalist that's actually been on the ground, that's the real shame. Because I feel like if you even do like a cursory research about Stand With Kashmir, you kind of get to know the kind of people that they support. They support people like Asiya Andrabi, they support people like Yasin Malik, and you do a little bit of research into the backgrounds of Asiya Andrabi, do a little bit of research into the backgrounds of somebody like Yasin Malik. But that's not what these diaspora organizations or these politicians are doing. It's just blind support. And I just feel like you're not really helping anyone with this kind of stuff.
They're not. Pramila Jayapal, was absolutely ridiculous. Because, it just occurred to me that they focus so much on intersectionality.
Oh my God!
Right?
Yeah,
intersectionality is the most woke thing, and woke also.
Yeah.
And much later it occurred to me that in that panel, I was by far I'm the person who has crossed all these identity barriers. Because just look at me, a displaced Kashmiri Pandit,
Yeah.
an avowed atheist,
Right.
Critical of the Modi government, critical of the Congress government,
Yeah.
critical of Hindutva conservatives, Islamist conservatives, left of course I call them conservatives because even the left is
Definitely.
Right? So in that panel, and I married out of my religion, I'm
Right.
married out of community, I married out of my ethnicity.
Right.
So I crossed all the barriers, so the intersectionality of identities, actually I was the perfect specimen, in that panel.
Right.
But Pramila Jayapal was so enamored, of course, which was just an optic, which was just a drama, theatrics.
Right.
She was so enamored by Natasha Cole using the phrase intersectionality of identity.
Yeah.
I'm the liberal here. You're not.
Yeah.
I speak for Kashmiri Muslims. I speak for Indian Muslims. I speak for the voiceless people.
Yeah.
I'm not from a privileged background. My family was in a refugee camp.
Yeah.
I grew up in destitution and in poverty. I, as a displaced, Kashmiri Pandit, I'm self-taught, self-made in many ways.
Yeah.
And I have crossed all the identity barriers. And you're telling me that I'm the mouthpiece of the government, and then you're saying I'm this supposedly right-wing loony.
Right.
So but coming to Stand With Kashmir and coming to the fact that nobody will go into what they really propagate and what they believe in.
Right.
Asiya Andrabi, for example. Asiya Andrabi, so Stand With Kashmir supports Asiya Andrabi. Who is Asiya Andrabi? Asiya Andrabi is the chief of Duktarane Millat. What did Duktarane Millat do in Kashmir? Duktarane Millat attacked women, Kashmiri women like me in Kashmir, because we were liberal.
Yeah.
We were liberal because we wore jeans. We did not cover our heads.
Yeah.
So, Asiya
What a crime.
Yeah, what a crime.
Yeah.
So, Asiya Andrabi's gang would go out on the streets. They would throw acid. They would
Wow.
throw ink on women if they did not adhere to the Islamic dress code.
Right.
Okay, and Asiya Andrabi is a supporter of Al Qaeda. So Stand With Kashmir is a supporter of Asiya Andrabi. Asiya Andrabi is a supporter of Al Qaeda.
Right.
And in fact, Imran Khan is also a supporter of Al Qaeda. Just yesterday, he said he called Osama bin Laden
A martyr.
a Carter.
Yeah.
Okay, so whom are they fooling? They're fooling the most naive and the most idealistic liberals in the West,
Right.
because they don't know enough,
Yeah.
because they don't know better, because
Yeah.
they don't know anything about Kashmir, they don't know about Pakistan. All they hear is this leftist narrative, which is disguised Islamism.
Yeah.
So
Well,
they
that's the
don't.
problem, right? That's because you were talking about how you tick all the boxes on the intersectional ladder. The only box you didn't tick is being a Muslim, and so
Yeah,
that takes you down a bunch of notches on that ladder. And so you will not be spoken for, and in these university circles, in these cool groups like Hindus Against Hindutva Ideology or whatever, and
yeah,
they will not talk about you because they're talking about this resistance in Kashmir. And that kind of brings me again to another organization that's come up in the last few months in Kashmir, that sort of, again, kind of like Stand With Kashmir, sort of come out of nowhere almost into prominence. At least it's the Resistance Front, and how they've like rebranded themselves essentially, and now they're talking about resistance. They're using the same kind of language that the liberals in the United States use, the whole hashtag resist thing, and they're doing that. And the kind of words, and obviously a lot of people here watching this will know that the Resistance Front was responsible for killing a Kashmiri sarpanch recently, Ajay Pandita.
mhm,
And the kind of language that they used was very telling, that they did not use the word Hindu, they did not use the word Sikh. They said, we will kill collaborators. And that's a
yeah,
very interesting word, because I've heard that word plenty of times before from these Islamist groups.
yeah,
Anybody, they could be a Hindu, they could be a Sikh, they could be a Muslim. But if you're someone that does not completely 100% agree with the idea of Nizam-e-Mustafa and Kashmir Banega Pakistan, you're essentially a collaborator with the Hindu government. And so, as a collaborator, you deserve to be eliminated.
yeah.
And that's a very interesting concept.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I want to talk about TRF because I did a piece on TRF.
Right.
Am researching them as well, and based on what I hear from my sources in Kashmir, based on sources I have in Pakistan, what I understood from the TRF, and it was telling that in one of their statements, they used the poem of Aga Shahid Ali.
Mm.
Now, who is Aga Shahid Ali? Aga Shahid Ali was a Kashmiri poet based in the US. He called himself an Indian American Kashmiri.
Interesting.
Throughout his life, he called himself an Indian American Kashmiri.
Right.
He came from a very illustrious, very influential family in Srinagar, and he studied in Delhi. He was part and parcel of the elite circle of Delhi. And it was astonishing that TRF used a couple of lines from his poem called a pastoral, and it is from his collection called "The Country Without a Post Office."
Right.
Uh, this book came, I think, in the 90s, and until until September 11, nobody talked about Aga Shahid Ali in Kashmir, because I remember, I used to be an avid reader of news, because I think I was interested in news given our circumstances, and I don't remember Aga Shahid Ali being quoted as a resistance poet.
Right.
Right, but his appropriation began after September 11, and
Right.
I started seeing lots of Kashmiri journalists. Some of my friends, also Kashmiri Muslim friends, started quoting Shahid as a resistance poet.
Hmm.
Now, what is a resistance poet? Resistance poet was essentially meant that he was their intellectual ideologue for Kashmir's separatism from India.
Right.
He was for Kashmir's self-determination and Kashmir's independence from India. Now, TRF using this is amazing because TRF is taking credit, is taking responsibility for terror attacks in Kashmir as of today.
Yes.
They are taking responsibility for the killing of Ajay Pandita, a Kashmiri Pandit, political activist who's been working in Kashmir for years.
Yeah.
Have been working there. He is killed and they take its responsibility. TRF has taken responsibility for other attacks as well. And they are using poetry of Aga Shahid Ali. It's a travesty for
Yeah.
Aga Shahid Ali and his family. Aga Shahid Ali, who called himself an Indian American Kashmiri poet.
Right.
He wrote this poem. Which TRF quoted for a Kashmiri Pandit friend.
Oh wow.
Yeah, just see the irony.
Yeah.
The irony of it, the contradiction of it. He wrote it for his Kashmiri Pandit friend because he was bemoaning the loss of that syncretic culture between Kashmiri Pandits and Kashmiri Muslims. He was grieving for the loss of friendship between them because of the displacement, because of how Kashmiri Pandits were driven out of Kashmir, because how they were targeted, selectively targeted, how Kashmiri Pandits were tortured and some women were raped and brutally murdered.
Right.
He wrote this poem for Kashmiri Pandits. TRF uses that quote from his poem to project as if he was talking about independence of Kashmir, and TRF takes credit for killing a Kashmiri Pandit.
Right.
Now, again, this is, I would say, if you're following the pattern with which Stand with Kashmir, ICNA, HHRD, Jamaat, Hizbul Mujahideen, Lashkar, they all work in tandem with each other. This falls in pattern. This is classic. This is classic schizophrenia of these terror groups, which appropriate everything that they find to project themselves as an intellectual secular movement.
Right.
They do exactly what the Islamist ideology, tells them to do.
Yeah.
So Stand with Kashmir, as I pointed out earlier, is backed by Angana Chatterjee's and Natasha Paul's.
Yeah.
This so-called diva of intersectionality, this woman who thinks that she's this great leftist intellectual, the wannabe Arundhati Roy.
Yeah.
One has to accept, she's part of that cult because Arundhati Roy created this whole entire cult, which could not think logically or rationally, but which went by emotions, which went by sentiments, and which revolved their politics around identities.
Right.
And in this discourse, the only identity that matters to them is the Muslim identity.
Yeah.
Nothing else matters. So Muslims are the only victims. Kashmiri Pandits who were driven out, who were subjected to so much torture and harassment and displacement and destitution, they are not victims. Kashmiri Sikhs who were killed in Chitty Singhpora, who are still getting targeted in Kashmir, in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, Hindus who are getting targeted in Pakistan, Muslims who are Shia Muslims, Ahmadiyas who are getting targeted in Pakistan.
The scheduled caste and scheduled tribes that are being targeted in Kashmir.
Dalits who are getting, who were targeted and who were denied their fundamental rights under Article 370 and 35A. Again, they are not the victims. The only victims who exist are the Sunni Muslim victims of, victims really, but the Sunni Muslims who are perpetrating terror against India, terror against the US and the West, they are the victims. That's the crux of it.
That's essentially is the crux of it. And, moving forward, finally, I wanted to ask you as well, what do you, how have you sort of judged since the abrogation of Article 370? Since you're someone who knows the state well, who's been on the ground, how have you judged how the BJP government has handled the situation in Kashmir post the abrogation of Article 370? Because, recently they instituted the 15-year domicile law, which obviously, I mean, you and I have a mutual friend, Abhijit Iyer Mitra, who was extremely unhappy with it. Said basically, kind of like, in his opinion, it really undoes a lot of the benefits that came from the abrogation of Article 370 and removal of 35A. So, in your opinion, so far, how have you judged the way the government's handled Kashmir since then?
I would say, whenever you're discussing Kashmir, you have to see it in the context of history.
Sure.
You cannot, for that matter, anything. Whenever we judge something, we must judge it in its proper context.
Sure.
The left is supposedly, are the champions or the flag bearers of nuance. They're the flag bearers of understanding the context.
Right.
But unfortunately, when it comes to Kashmir, when it comes to Muslim majoritarianism, Muslim communalism, Islamist terror, they forget the context. They just don't want to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
So in Kashmir, in 2016, when Hizbul Mujahideen commander, I will repeat again for the benefit of our audience, Hizbul Mujahideen, an armed militant wing of Jamaat-e-Islami. Jamaat-e-Islami connected to HHRD and ICNA. So the connection, right? And Ilhan. So this connection, Hizbul Mujahideen's commander Burhan Wani was killed in 2016 in an encounter by the Indian security forces, which included Jammu and Kashmir peace.
Right.
He was killed, and the entire valley was swamped by rioters, mobs, arsonists, and basically terrorists and their overground and underground workers.
Right.
There was so much violence that that in the resulting clashes with the Indian security forces, around 90 people were killed.
Right.
So post August 5, 2019, India does not impose a lockdown on the movement of people. It imposes a lockdown on the gatherings of people.
Right.
And it imposes a communication blockade. Okay, people are free to move. If they want to go out and do their shopping, go to or their offices, go to schools and educational institutions, but people don't, because there is a threat.
Right.
Who issues that threat? The threat is issued by Hizbul Mujahideen, Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed. These are the three terror groups based in Pakistan. They are the ones who ask people not to resume their normal duties and normal life. And if they do, they will get killed.
Right.
So the government of India ensures through this minimal communication blockade, because in 2016, what we noticed was that people were mobilized using mobile phones, SMSs, WhatsApp. Hundreds of WhatsApp groups were created in 2016 to mobilize people, to mobilize youth, young children mostly, to come to the streets and get killed. There was a classic Pakistani ploy to bring kids to sorry.
Sure.
Bring kids to the streets and get killed. Now, in 2019, nothing happens.
Right.
People don't come to the streets. There is no violence on the streets, as we had seen in 2016 over the killing of a Hizbul commander. People are resentful. People are disillusioned. People have anger. Many are upset that that 370 is gone, and they have fears and anxieties about what happens to their jobs, what happens to their land. Does it mean that anyone can come and buy land and become a resident, become a property owner in Kashmir? So all those anxieties play on their minds, and also the fact that for the last 70 years, National Conference and PDP and Kashmir-centric political parties sold this idea that Article 370 was the safeguard, the savior of Kashmir's demographics.
Yeah.
That if this article is removed, the demographics of Kashmir will change and it will become a Hindu majority value.
Right.
Whereas the fact is, in the last 72 years, the only demographics that changed was that Kashmiri Pandits were removed from Kashmir. Right? So you ensured the minorities were driven out. It remained a highly majoritarian, homogeneous society.
Yeah.
In the last 72 years, neither Buddhists of Ladakh nor Hindu Dogras of Jammu were able to change the demographics of Kashmir, even as they had rights to go and establish themselves in Kashmir.
Yeah.
Neither of the communities did that. Okay, so this fear, this anxiety that that demographics is going to change, it was sustained and it was perpetuated by the mainstream political parties.
Yeah.
So it was obvious that there would be disillusionment, that there would be anger, there would be a resentment against New Delhi, against the BJP government. But as time passed by, we realized that the anger, the disillusionment, the resentment wasn't so intense that people would come to the streets to get killed or to kill. Right. So because as I said, the lockdown was not for movement of people. People could come, a single person, if he was angry, he could burn an entire village. Right. But that did not happen. So I would say that the government handled it very well.
Okay.
There was some thinking which went into the management of post-August 5th situation. The government handled it well. Now coming to the domicile law. Personally, I would say that, it makes sense that somebody who has worked in Kashmir for 15 years, who has lived in Kashmir for 15 years, who has given, almost 2 decades of his life,
right,
or 3 decades. There are people, who've been in, for example, my father-in-law served in Kashmir for 3 decades, but
okay.
He was not a domicile. He was not a resident. His children, they could not draw the benefits. They could not even access higher education in Kashmir.
Right.
They had to move out for education. So if somebody has served in a state for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, I think is eligible.
Sure.
So and if a Kashmiri, for example, a Kashmiri Pandit or Sikh or Muslim, he is able to establish himself in Kochi, or he's able to establish himself in Punjab and Bengal and Odisha or Chennai or any other part of India.
Yeah.
Why can't Indians go and establish themselves in Kashmir?
Right.
If you look at all these states, Bengal, for example, Bengal in the last 72 years of independence has remained a Bengali majority state.
Yeah.
Tamil Nadu has remained essentially a Madrasi Tamil dominated state. So is Kerala. So all the states, despite the fact that there was no 370.
Yeah.
There was no 370, no special status. All the states retained their ethnicity, their ethnic majority
Right.
character. So why do you think Kashmir will change? People
Right.
don't move easily. That's the logic. People don't move easily from one state to another. They don't leave their homes easily,
Yeah.
right? So this fear, I would say, is unfounded. Where the government actually made a mistake is that, to say that only people who served in Kashmir for 15 years or who lived in Kashmir will be the domicile.
Yeah.
Uh, I think there is no reason whatsoever for Jammu and Kashmir to be special.
Yeah.
There is no reason for Kashmir to be special. You can have environmental laws if you have worries and fears about environmental degradation. If you have worries about, say, reckless urbanization, you can have those laws.
Right.
You don't have to give domicile because you think people are special.
Yeah. I mean, Missouri has those laws, right? Like you have
Yeah,
those laws up in the mountains in Himachal and Uttarakhand as well. So you can
exactly.
have those laws in Kashmir, but like special conditions for domicile, it doesn't really make that much sense.
Yeah. So the government clearly undid what it had achieved by nullifying 370.
Yeah.
But I would say, it's not completely undoing of what they achieved. Um, I would say that to some extent, they patched and they compromised on
Yeah.
something which was critical, which was, on principle was not right to do.
Yeah.
But I'm still okay, with it, because at the end of the day, they are giving rights to Dalits. They are giving rights um, to Pakistanis, West Pakistani refugees who were living in Jammu and Kashmir
Yeah.
since 1947, but did not have any rights as citizens of Jammu and Kashmir. So they are giving rights to women under a certain permanent residency law. Women who married outsiders, their children could not inherit their properties,
Yeah.
their parents' properties. So they've undone. They have undone a long list of injustices which were committed against several groups of people.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say that, I wouldn't go as far as Abhijit Iyer Mitra has.
Abhijit
But
loves that stuff though.
yeah, but I would
Yeah.
say that, as a person, I will repeat it. Jammu and Kashmir is no different from any other
Right.
state in India. Um, just because it's a Muslim majority state does not entitle it to have a special characteristic, or to get extra laws, or additional laws or additional treatment as compared to other states. Because then you're contradicting yourself. We are a secular state. We see everyone as an equal. Hindus, Muslims are equals.
Yeah.
There can't be discrimination against one group or the other. So from my understanding of political theory, my
Mm.
understanding as a student of international affairs and politics, I would say a bad move.
Yeah, and I would say the saving grace here and the silver lining here is that even the domicile rule can be changed with an executive order. Like, if the government decides tomorrow, all right, fine, let's shrink it back down to like 10 or 5 years. They can change it. They don't need to go through both
Yeah,
houses of the parliament and get it passed through two-thirds majority. They
yeah,
did the hard part. Like if they want to change the domicile law, that's easy for them now.
yeah.
So at least there's that, right? Yeah, and so I do think this was something that was pretty momentous in Jammu Kashmir's history. Like I agree with you there, and I hope
Hello. Hello. Hello.
People like you are.
Hello.
Oh, I think my internet must have conked out for a second there.
Yeah, it conked out for a minute. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No. Basically, what I was saying was I'm just glad there are people like you shedding light on this situation, and hopefully, there's a cognizance from the government of this threat as well, and they make the kinds of investments that countries like Pakistan have made in building up this kind of infrastructure in the West. I can only hope that the Indian government sort of wakes up and realizes what it needs to do as well. But other than that, Aarti, I really appreciate you coming on today. This was very enlightening, I'm sure.
Thank you so much, Shambhav. It was a delight to talk to you, and I'm glad, in fact, honored that you invited me to do this. I also meant to do it for a long time, but somehow
Same. Yeah.
didn't do it. But this has been great, a fantastic conversation. I wish you all the best, and I know that you're going to bring in more interesting conversations to the platform. All the best for that.
Thank you, and I'd love to have you on again at some time in the future and have one of these chats again because this was fun.
Thank you so much, Amber. Thank you.
All right, stick around for a second offline there, Aarti. And in the meantime, guys, I'll leave Aarti's social media stuff. You can in the description below. You can go follow her. You can check out her work. She's doing a lot of very important work when it comes to Kashmir, when it comes to sort of observing India's neighborhood. So make sure you go follow her as well. Again, if you like today's episode, make sure to leave a like, leave a thumbs up, subscribe, share, listen to the podcast. Go give it a high rating on iTunes and Spotify and all that fun stuff. If you want to abuse, go abuse in the comments as well, because that'll help the video too. So go ahead and do all of that. I'll see you guys for the next episode. Until then, stay happy, stay healthy, and I will see you guys soon.